Hello and welcome to the AVForums podcast for Wednesday, the 21st of October 2015. Seems familiar that date. Joining me, Assistant Editor Steve Withers.
Look, I'm all for that, but what's wrong with making a few bucks on the side?
News Editor Mark Hodgkinson.
You're the Doc.
And Audio Reviewer Ed Selly.
On the other hand, it could just be an amazing coincidence.
Well, welcome back to the podcast. We were on holiday I was on holiday last week, but I've come back and having real issues. You know, you think you buy Audi, as a car, you think it's going to be a good brand. I know you bought Skoda, which is basically the same group, Ed, having real hassle with it. I mean, the hover conversion that was done on it just doesn't work.
Well, look on the bright side. I mean, I've just had to fork out $130,000 for a new Mr. Fusion on the Skoda. So, I think we're both having some fun and games for different reasons.
And that's the one that doesn't take the banana skins as well, is it? It doesn't take organic produce, which
no.
You'd think...
Just old cans of Miller.
Yeah. So, luckily, we were over the lock at the time, so I was able to bring it in and land it just at the side of the lock without any major damage. But
that was a close call, Phil, because if you'd gone over the water, you'd have been buggered.
Yeah. We were going along the side of the lock, so luckily I was able to bring it in on a passing place and land. I did have a big sign saying no landing, but I thought it was kind of an emergency, so you got basically...
I did warn you not to get that Lufthansa upgrade, didn't I?
Well, at least it wasn't in the VW Mr. Fusion that you went for, Ed, because look at the problems in the press this week with the
this is
emissions.
True. This is the older model, but it still goes spectacularly. I mean, there was undigested rubbish all over the road. My wife was very upset, as I say, significant money to get another one put in. Far from ideal.
And these new jeans that I bought as well at the weekend after being on holiday, I thought I fancy a new pair of jeans. The pockets, when you pull them out, they're not long enough. So I'm not down with the kids at the minute. My pockets hanging out are not long enough on these new jeans. Mark, you've been looking at the latest pull-down TVs. What's your recommendation? You've been looking at the big four. Which ones do the job?
Right, okay. Well, I looked at the Sony X90. It's just the 26th consecutive year we've used that product number. They put a Z on it at the end this time. It's got all the usual smart TV features, Watch 6, Record 6, voice control, video conferencing. Sony says they've improved the compression through the video telephone line by up to 1% this year. They've also been redesigning the UI and the menu system. And they finally made it so complicated to use that you need a 2-year course at university before you're allowed to. The Sony engineers are apparently delighted with the results. They all come with an exclusive deal that gives them all the pay-per-view events on the Atrocity channel, free for a year. In terms of PQ, there are definitely no complaints. Good black levels, although some of the picture controls weren't available as I'm only halfway through that course at the moment. It should be noted this is the only holographic 3D TV amongst the group, but Sony doesn't mention that anywhere and the spec sheet.
See, the big problem I've got with the Sony TVs, Mark, you'll have had a look at this, but how does it interact with your fax machine?
I've had some problems with that. As I say, I've not really completed the Smart TV University course yet, so I'm a little bit unsure on some of those features. The interaction seems iffy at best, I have to say. Some bugs in there.
Steve, have you been having problems with your fax line?
I've had problems with my thumb print identification, which is a real pain. It doesn't seem to recognise my thumb most of the time. I wish we could go back to the good old days of facial recognition for this kind of thing. Other than that, though, pretty clear line. I don't get many faxes these days because no one likes to talk to me, but when I do, it is pristine.
Okay, cool. So you also looked at the Samsung and the LG and the Panasonic. Mark, how did you get on there?
Samsung, it's a 96-inch LED LCD. Samsung are still convinced this is the way to go. There was a few uniformity issues with this one. As I was pulling it down, the cat was sick all over it, which was a bit unfortunate, but I think they'll fade in time. There's a software update coming for iPlayer, I believe. They've really pushed the boat out on the smart TV features. It's a watch 12 channels simultaneously.
Just 12?
Just 12, yeah. Well, it's 6 on the standard. It's got thought commands and a really grumpy voice assistant. Who'll give you abuse and mock your taste in movies. Samsung are claiming LG have had agents inside the factory who've implanted the assistant in there, but we can't really comment on that. The LG Smart TV platform is identical to Samsung's, strangely enough, except the malevolent assistant has been replaced by Beanbird squawking in unintelligible Korean. The picture quality... we forgot to mention that LG have been taken over by Zen Buddhists, so they're now able to achieve greater than infinite black levels and contrast. So it's quite
Is that the Nirvana range?
The Nirvana range, yes. Well, they haven't. The being Zens, you don't actually give it a name. You're free to name it whatever you want. I called it the ZOLED, but I'll go with your name if you like. This was the only 4:3 aspect ratio TV in for review, rather strangely. Panasonic. This is the TX75 PS902B. In the rest of the world, it's known as the PS900. Pan UK, I do have that weird number 2 fetish. It's the most expensive TV in the test, asking price of 10 grand. But then Panasonic is promising this is the new reference in pull-down TVs. Rumour has it some of the engineers who worked on the Legendary Plasma series were brought in from the old people's home to help out, and perhaps even some brought out of cryogenic stasis. Pleasingly, it is an OLED, although they've still not managed to crack producing their own panels. But they're not really worried about that. A rep told us we're just better than the rest at the other bits, so we don't need to, and they gave us a knowing look. I have to say the PQ...
They're still throwing in their special sauce.
There's plenty of special sauce behind the scenes, and a Kevlar back cover. It's great. The PQ on this one is great. Not sure it justifies the price, and all the smart TV features are currently missing.
Right, so it was a bit of a group test. I mean, hats off to you, both hats off to you, as well as both ties. You managed to hang these properly and get them reviewed. I mean, they're all pull-down screens. So which one won?
I'm going to have to give it to the Samsung because they comes with a free pair of JVC video glasses. They're only 1080p, but the black levels are really good.
And presumably we can all read your review in next month's issue of AVForums, which is now available with dust repellent paper.
Yes, indeed.
So don't forget the magazine is out at the end of the month. Right, so let's move on slightly. So you've looked at the screens, Mark, but the big thing here is obviously the TV channels that we all like to watch. I mean, I can't quite manage the 9 myself. 6 is the most I can manage to watch at any one time. But looking at things like the Scenery channel or the Atrocity channel, which is your favourite?
So I wasn't much into the Atrocity channel before I got the free pay-per-views from Sony, so I'd have to go with that. It's just brutal.
Ed, you normally moan about these things, so do you like looking at nice scenery, or are you more into the Atrocities?
I've got to be honest, I was a huge advocate of the Atrocity channel, but I don't know, I just think they're running out of Atrocities. Endless repeats, it's just not, it lacks the sparkle it once did. As a result of that, I do find myself looking at just scenery more often. But here's hoping, it's a brave new world out there. Let's hope for some fresh Atrocities and some new content going forward. And then who knows, it might be able to bring it back, get to the forefront of viewing again.
And
so Sony has promised some exclusive Atrocities are coming your way.
Well, they've been promising that for some time, and it's just, I don't know. There was a time when you couldn't move for Atrocities, and at the moment, they're just not getting the content that they need. And
your views, Steve?
Well, after a long period of time exposed to the Atrocity channel, I find I now spend most of my time watching the Lithium channel to offset the slightly depressive effects of the Atrocity channel.
Okay.
Well, you always were a weakling, to be honest, Steve.
Yeah. I mean, Steve, you're the only one that manages to pass out after having a Pepsi Perfect, aren't you? I mean, it's the one drinking no
it's
calories.
Straining myself trying to get those bottles open is the problem.
No calories, no caffeine, no sugar, and obviously no taste, yet you managed to black out.
Yeah.
Ed, what do you think of the new Pepsi Perfect?
Well, they've delivered pretty much on the mission statement. It is it's perfectly free of anything that you might sort of describe as taste or character. But in this day and age, you can't risk sort of doing anything untoward or delivering something. Let's face it, if there's flavour, somebody might not like it. So it's the perfect answer to the beverage issues that we face.
We're going to stay with you. Your subject is obviously music. Music from the 80s is your big thing. So tell us about this new cafe 80s revival that we're seeing happening on every high street at the moment. You down with it? Well,
I've got to be honest. For every place that's doing this properly, there are plenty of others where it's just a bit weak. I've got to be honest with you guys. The place I went to last night, it was just by the numbers. One gunslinger machine and a rendering of Ronald Reagan, the Ayatollah, and Michael Jackson is not in itself the 1980s. it just felt a little sort of manufactured. And
very US centric. I mean, I know they rule the world and all the rest of it, but very US centric.
Well, this is true. Obviously, since Rick Astley became president of Europe, he's been less keen to be used in these sort of nostalgia situations. So they do have some justification for that. But whilst they delivered a perfect Pepsi Perfect, I did feel that the rehydration on the food was indifferent, and I have to say that my afternoon there was fairly undermined by an altercation between some teenagers that wound up with some of them firing their way through the glass front of the City Hall and being arrested. And I have to admit that sort of took most of the shine off the day. But in principle, if Cafe 80s is done correctly, it could be nostalgiarific. It could be everything that you want.
Right. So to wrap up, we'll be back in a sec with movie news. Steve, so what's at the cinema?
What's big release this week? Obviously, everyone knows Jaws 19 came out. I can't believe 19th Jaws movie. Incredible. I mean, obviously, we all remember Jaws, the classic original, the one that made you afraid to go in the water back in 1975. Blimey, 40 years ago now. But still a classic, still one of the best ones ever made. Jaws 2 came along, made you afraid to go back in the water. Not great, but an all right sequel. Jaws 3 3D, during the 1980s 3D revival before the current one. That was made in 3D and added a new dimension in terror. Possibly wasn't a great film, but I quite enjoyed the 3D effects way back in the 80s. Jaws 4: The Revenge. That time they made it personal and definitely a low point in Michael Caine's career. Then after that we had Jaws 5, which was, let's be honest, just about the money. Jaws 6, that was just about pure pleasure. Jaws 7, Cyber Jaws. Now come on, seriously. Who did that film not make you afraid to log on? It certainly did make me afraid to log on. Jaws 8, we had a Robo Shark, Robo Jaws. And also a reanimated version of Michael Caine in that one too, because he died in Jaws 4. But they brought him back for Jaws 8 with a robotic shark. Fantastic. Quite enjoyed that one. Jaws 9, Chief Brody's grandson assembling a team of shark hunters. That's obviously the late Roy Scheider's character, Chief Brody, unfortunately. That was okay. Bit driveted there, a bit like Aliens, really, frankly, but with sharks. And then Jaws 10, man versus shark versus giant octopus. Now, who doesn't like a giant octopus and a giant shark? So that was actually okay. Jaws 11 went into outer space. Got to be honest there. I really enjoyed that one. The effects were superb.
Did you really? I thought it was really cashing in on...
Really? Well, I mean, I can buy a gigantic robotic shark in space. Who doesn't want to see that?
I think you're stalling here, Steve, because frankly, we all know that your favourite set of Jaws was when the license was taken over by the Brazzers porn website. So that's Jaws 12 through 17.
That's not.
I think that they worked in excessive hardcore pornography into the construct of battling a giant shark. I thought actually they did that with real delicacy, and that's obviously why, let's face it, the Academy Institute agreed with me, and Jaws 16 won Best Picture.
I would have been happier with the hardcore sex if they hadn't tried to make a prequel, because one of them was a prequel where there was no shark in it, which was a bit of a disappointment, in all honesty. And then the next one after that...
That's one of my favourites, I've got to be honest. Getting the shark, let's face it, was getting in the way of many of those scenes. I think that they had the honesty to acknowledge that.
Which one was that again? Was that Sword Jaws?
And then they made a sequel to the prequel, which was even more ridiculous. Although at least there was a shark at the very end of that film, in a lovely recreation of the beginning of the original film, where you saw a CG Christine Blackliney swimming in the water and the shark going into attack. But otherwise, it wasn't worth watching. I quite enjoyed 50 Shades of Teeth, though. I thought that one actually did handle the erotic nature very well. Jaws not 18, though. That was a reboot. Now, who wants to see a remake of Jaws? That was just a waste of time. And now that brings us to Jaws 19. And although we now have fusion power freely available, unfortunately, to a certain extent, it's been a bit too late. The oceans have receded, and now in this film, the sharks are on land. They're looking for revenge. They've lost their homes in the sea. They've evolved to breathe air, and they're on land. Could happen any day now. Directed by Max Spielberg, of course, the son of the director of the original film, and starring Shia LaBeouf, who's reprising his role as Chief Brody's grandson. Also, Jim Carrey reappearing again after his appearance in, I believe it was Jaws 12. He uses Holomax, of course. This is the current 3D craze. And I've got to say, I'm not a big fan of Holomax. I don't really want to be immersed in the film to the point where I'm actually inside the movie. I find that a little bit disconcerting sometimes, particularly during the hardcore sex scenes. And when you move your head, you lose the 3D effect, which is always a pain.
Yeah.
And frankly, the shark still looks fake.
Yeah. It's when you move to have a look back, isn't it? And just goes. Although, spraying water on you for some of the effects doesn't really work, does it?
It wasn't the water that bothered me. It was during some of the hardcore ones. They weren't just spraying water, Phil.
Yeah, and obviously when you've got clothes which are, self-tightening and therefore electrically powered, the last thing you want to do is be shorted out by just bodily fluids being squirted at you from some
All right,
place.
enough.
I give it 4 out of 10.
4 out of 10. Okay, good. All right, so if you haven't realised yet, and let's face it, I think everybody got the joke right at the very start, and we've kind of just milked it for everything it's
We've
worth.
gone well past the point. But anyway.
Well past the point of comedy and straight past desperation into just flogging that horse until it falls
Well,
apart.
that's at the stage where before it's edited. It might actually... No, it won't. It won't.
No, you need to force the full unexpurgated version on the public.
Get your words out, Steve.
I was going to say population, but I thought that's pushing it.
Okay, so if you hadn't realised, I think everybody has, today is the exact day that Marty, Jennifer and the Doc went back, forward to, in Back to the Future Part 2. We are in the future, people. So Ed, take us through what they might have got right and what they definitely got wrong.
Do you know the most depressing thing is that there's not a huge amount right, is there? When it boils down to it, there is no federal weather service. Cars only fly if you really, really gun them over a humpback bridge.
Looking at the roads now and looking at the idiots on the roads.
I was about to say, I am eternally grateful for the. I mean, let's face it. Enough people on our nation's highways and byways have enough problems with a car that operates in 2 dimensions. So adding a third probably isn't necessary.
It is a sad fact that these days, even getting on a commercial airline is hard enough. The idea of, in our current geopolitical situation, of allowing anyone to fly a bomb around in the air in a car loaded with fuel doesn't seem like the best idea. And had it ever really happened, it would have been there would have been chaos, wouldn't it?
Now, do you think
chaos?
Do you think it was? There was a definite 80s look to the future, wasn't it? Really, I mean, you just have to look at Back to the Future in terms of the very 80s attitude of all 3 of the films. Really, I mean, what's his aspirations? His aspirations to have a nice truck and to have a lot of material things, isn't it? Which is a very 80s way of looking at the world. And do you think they took that a bit too far? I mean, it was 30 years into the future. Now, somebody says to you 30 years into the future, are you going to make some of the leaps that they made?
It comes off the back of if you look 30 years from 55 to 85, as the first film did, there are some serious technical advancements.
Yeah,
and it's a lot of it
cultural
is
changes as well.
a lot of it is engineering and physical product based stuff. So it was perfectly logical to extrapolate based on the preceding 30 years what the next 30 years were going to do, completely ignoring that. In fact, many of the constructs in Back to the Future 2 are laughably outdated. Dot matrix printers and all sorts of other.
Well,
stuff
I kept mentioning the fax machine.
Absolutely.
You've been faxed.
It failed. We have achieved. Don't get me wrong, some extraordinary things, but it's much less visually apparent. But it still wouldn't change the fact that you just drop someone from 1985 into the present. Don't get me wrong; they'll function as a normal human being, but there will be certain things that we've got and certain things that we do that are pretty witchcrafty when you don't have the intervening 30 years to see how they came
Well,
about.
I mean, the big thing that they missed, although they got some of it right with the video calling and so on, was the internet. Everything being connected and easier communication. And when you think that AT&T were definitely in on the research, because they're mentioned quite a bit in the actual film, product placement wise, it's kind of funny that they didn't pick up on the whole mass communication of the internet and where things would go with that. It's the big thing that they did miss out on.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think in fairness, nobody really saw that coming back then, did they? And I suppose the film is inherently comic, therefore a lot of their predictions are designed to be funny, and I don't think anyone expected there to be flying cars in 30 years' time or a Mr. Fusion.
I did.
How,
I did when I seen that in 1980, whatever it was. I couldn't wait to get a flying car.
And also,
I've got to be honest, I want a Mr. Fusion.
Yeah, Mr. Fusion would be great.
That would be the bomb.
But they also do that. I mean, not this film. I mean, clearly this film is meant to be comic, and therefore the things about trousers inside out and two tires and that kind of thing is a joke. But a lot of science fiction films often make the mistake of taking fashion too far. When you actually look at fashion and clothing over the last 100 years, it hasn't actually changed that much and tends to go around in cycles. So people still wear a suit with a tie and a shirt and trousers and shoes. Things haven't changed. There are occasional blips in fashion, which you'll get, but I think generally clothes don't change as much as filmmakers often think that they do in movies. But I think they got a lot of things, a lot of things they mention in the film, often in passing or barely even notice them, like widescreen TVs, flat screen wall-mounted televisions, multiple channels, watching multiple channels simultaneously. You can do that now. Fingerprint identification, definitely, that's good. Everyone's phone does that now.
Yeah, the thing is, I think if you want to make a successful vision of the future, be incredibly careful what computer technology you show. Just work on. Essentially, you either go with in the case of computers, it now really is a case of you either think go as far as your imagination will take you and possibly a bit further. And the astonishing truth is the likelihood is you won't be all the way there. Or just try and bypass it altogether.
Well, if you look closely, when he asked for a donation for the clock tower, he's using an iPad-like device with a fingerprint to make the payment. Same with the taxi that the old Biff gets, the payment by fingerprint. We're almost there. Most of mobile phones do that now. And again, that was like an iPad-like device. So I think they actually got that. And this, like you say, Steve, these were the little things.
The video glasses that young Marty Jr. is wearing, that's basically Google Glass, although no one actually wanted it in the end, as it turns out. One of the things they did get absolutely right, because remember when they parked Jennifer when she's asleep, next to a pile of old Laserdiscs.
Laserdisc, yeah.
But what they did miss was the revival of vinyl, Ed.
This is true, but that's so outlandish as to be very hard.
That's more unlikely than flying cars.
Yeah,
and hoverboards. Yeah.
You've seen that they've am I right in thinking that the fake hoverboard Segway they made has been banned?
I think all Segways have under the Road Traffic Act now.
Are they? Yeah,
I don't think you can use any, certainly in public. It has to be on private land now, I think. Yeah, they were always. So yeah, I think they got more right than they got wrong. It was the really big stuff they got wrong, like the flying cars and the hoverboards and the action set piece stuff that they used. But a lot of the little things, I think they got right. So let's go Holomax. So we're not quite there yet, but you went and had a look at some really interesting projector technology a couple of weeks ago, Steve, at the Empire in Leicester Square. So tell us about
that. This was the IMAX Laser projector that they've just installed into the Empire in Leicester Square in their main IMAX screen. You're talking big screen here, 80, 90-foot cinema screen. And they had two IMAX laser projectors in there. So if they're doing a 2D presentation, they actually merge the two with a slight diagonal shift. So a bit like E-shift, but with two giant projectors. So you're getting... the resolution of each projector is 4K, so you're getting technically a higher than 4K resolution off these two laser projectors. And obviously, being laser, incredibly bright, can do Rec 2020 color space if there was any content available to use that. So much wider color space, very, very bright, even on those huge screens. And they're using two of them. So when they're doing 3D, they use obviously one for left and one for right. And again, we actually did demonstrations. We did demonstrations of 2D stuff and also some 3D stuff. And they showed the Star Wars trailer, the first Star Wars trailer for The Force Awakens. They showed that in 2D, then they showed it again straight afterwards in 3D. And there was barely any difference in brightness. That is how bright they can do this now. So it's a real shame that kind of just as 3D's popularity is really waning now, they've come along with a project technology that can actually deliver 3D without any drop in brightness. You're not talking about 4-foot Lamberts here. You're talking about full brightness for both eyes in the cinema. And also being laser, and what IMAX done is they built their own. They used Texas Instruments panels, but they actually have built their own assembly in order to ensure they can get as black as possible. The cinema itself totally blacked out as well. They make a point of that actually when they were doing the demos. And so anyone who's building one at home, that's the way you want to go. You want to maximize your dynamic range here. You try and get your room as dark as possible. This is what they do in the cinema. They're trying to minimize any lighting. And obviously they have to have exit signs under law, but the seating, the walls, they were black. It was black in there. And then the black levels on this projector were really good. The best I've ever seen in a commercial cinema. So the interesting thing though was they did this demo stuff. So they showed some 2K stuff. They showed some 4K stuff. They showed some stuff that was shot on IMAX, as in IMAX, 70mm film stock, and the really high quality stuff looked absolutely stunning, easily the best projected image I've ever seen anywhere. But the interesting thing was that because of the size of the screen and because of the quality of the projection, you could easily tell when something was 2K and not native 4K. And the point they made was that actually a lot of stuff still is finished in 2K, even if it's shot on a 4K camera. And we actually watched the whole of The Walk, Robert Zemeckis' new film. Speaking of Back to the Future, Robert Zemeckis' new film, which is about, I've forgotten his first name now. What's his name? Philippe Petit, yeah. Philippe Petit, who was the guy that walked between the Twin Towers back in 1974. Song? That's Rick Petit. Oh, right. That's what they say in Newcastle. It's Rick Petit, that. He walked between Twin Towers, and this is kind of the film. It was covered in the documentary Man on Wire, and this is the film version of that story. To be honest, the majority of the film is fairly, he speaks with it. It's Joseph Gordon-Levitt who's playing Petit, and he's putting on a fake French accent. It sounds very low, but really the film's about the last 20 minutes where he's up on that wire, and this is in IMAX laser projection 3D. All
right, you can stop. You can stop talking about it now because you're just going to put images in my head, and I've got really bad vertigo.
Well, there were audible shocks, sounds from people in the audience who were struggling to handle the vertigo aspects of it. Yeah, I mean, there's bits where the camera looks down, you're like, oh my God. But that was a 2K finished film, and you could tell. I could instantly tell that was not finished in 4K. Interestingly, they mentioned that they're doing a big IMAX screening next Monday. It starts for SPECTRE. That opens on Monday, nationwide, and the IMAX version is finished in 4K. And as I was leaving the cinema, Sam Mendes was going in to see it for the first time in IMAX Laser in 4K.
Just to name drop,
Yeah, just thought I'd drop that one in. But yeah, no, so really impressive. They've also got their own sound system, which is similar in some respects to Dolby, in a sense it's immersive with overhead and more speakers around you. But they made the point that theirs is not object-based. They're still using channels and also they said that their sound design is designed for their cinema. So rather than Dolby Atmos, which obviously can be ported into any cinema, and then it maps to that cinema space in real time, given the configuration of speakers in that particular cinema. So it's doing the conversion on the fly, if you like, in terms of mapping to that particular space. Theirs is obviously custom built for their cinemas, and they're all done exactly the same. So they seem to feel that gives them a better overall experience because it's all all customized for each IMAX cinema. And obviously, IMAX is about you're paying for that premium experience. And that's something that's interesting because I think that cinemas generally are trying to push their way towards that. Things like Dolby Cinemas, that kind of stuff. It's about giving you that premium experience now, because what's happened is that at home we're getting, bigger screens, higher quality sources, more audio from me. You can sit at home now, or I can sit at home now and watch a film on a big screen with Atmos surround and speakers overhead. And you can do all this stuff at home. So they're going to have to up their game at the cinema in order to get people to keep going to the cinema. So
they need the Atrocity channel. It makes sense.
I mean, one of the main questions here is that obviously we've looked at the Epson laser projector, the home version of that, which fires the laser off the phosphors, obviously to keep things safe in the home. So there's not direct laser light. How are they using the laser in these IMAX?
They're using direct lasers.
So RGB lasers then?
Yes, exactly. So clearly there's a lot more health and safety issues with this. But, I've never been to cinema. Obviously, you can't look into the screen, into the projection booth because it's above you. But yeah, so they're much, much, much brighter than the domestic versions you'll get, or even that Sony that's been announced last week, which was it's kind of a stripped down cinema projector effectively, but at 60 grand, you expect
That's the VW 5000.
Yes, the VW 5000, which is like $60,000 or quid, maybe 60,000 quid. But yeah, it's obviously so it's RGB laser. So you're getting, like I said, they can deliver Rec 2020 if necessary. And interestingly, the Jungle Book, which comes out early next year, that there will be some screenings. They're doing a Rec 2020 version of that for some screenings, presumably on IMAX Laser. That's interesting because that will be a first, an absolute first, because obviously currently all movies are finished using DCI color space.
Oh, assuming I haven't just spent £1,100 putting my car back together, how much does one of these little installations set one back? Were they prepared to let that one slip?
No, but it's very, very expensive.
Well, if you consider Ed that if you are a client of IMAX for a home theatre, the cheapest one runs into millions.
Nice.
And the regular one is about 5 million.
Right, good. No, that's all fine.
What was funny,
on the back of the sofa,
given that they're really pushing the whole premium experience thing, is there anyone that's been to an IMAX, a proper IMAX screen, not those kind of IMAX light things, but the real IMAX screens? Their seating's very tiered, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
And there was these very comfortable leather chairs and everything. That's very nice, but almost no leg room. I mean, I'm not that tall, and I was cramped and stuck in there. I thought, God, if anyone's got long legs, this is going to be a really uncomfortable 2 hours. So I'm amazed they didn't put a bit more legroom in there.
I always go for premium seats when I go to the IMAX. You get a bit more legroom, and I'm a short.
Well, these were all premium seats. There were no non-premium seats.
Really? Okay.
They had
no
none of legroom.
But then, if you think, I mean, that used to be the old screen one, didn't
they're
it?
trying to cram it into a relatively small space.
And they've split it into two, haven't they? Yeah. So it was the old screen one, and they've split it into two IMAX things. Yeah.
But certainly technology-wise, very, very impressive, and clearly that's the future. They were quite keen to point out that there are obviously other laser projectors being used. I mean, Dolby Cinema being the obvious example, and I forgot to mention, of course, because it's laser, they can also deliver HDR. But they were keen to point out that because they actually built the projectors from the ground up and changed the way that the panels are all aligned and the actual device that holds them. They said they've managed to improve the black levels and contrast ratio on their projectors substantially in comparison to the competition.
Yeah, because DLP has never been great.
Never been its strong point, no.
As they are lasers, can they also be used to explode the heads of people talking, using their phones, or eating unnecessarily noisy food?
No, that would be great if they did. Yeah,
because it's a missed opportunity if it can't. Got to be honest.
Yeah,
that was clearly one of the things about the Future Pods we did miss, which is that everyone's on their mobile phones these days.
Well, mobile phones were still fax machines back then, mate, wasn't it?
Yeah, there was an AT&T phone booth in one shot as well.
yeah, never going to see that.
Right.
Yes, so IMAX Laser was very impressive.
So that's Empire Leicester Square. I think it's the only one in the UK at the moment, isn't it? So
yes. So obviously, if you want to check it out, I guess this week they're still playing The Walk, but next week it's going to be Spectre, and obviously come December, Star Wars: The Force Awakens.
No, I wouldn't have bothered going to see that. You don't want to go and see Star Wars. Nobody buy tickets for it. It's not worth it.
Well, no, I'm afraid actually I've had a ticket booked for me. I was granted 17th of December, in fact, at the IMAX.
Is that your birthday, Ed?
No, the 18th of December is my birthday. I thought it came out on the 18th, but apparently there's some advanced screens on the 17th, just to really screw everything up. So
you kind of mention your birthday again.
It is my birthday on the 18th.
Okay, so another thing was the big 80s revival thing. I mean, obviously it had to do that in the film because it was based around 55, 85 and 2015. But there is a big revival, obviously, with vinyl, Ed. And the 80s, looking at things now, how everything is such a compressed mess when you look at how music is mastered. And there's very few recording studios still mastering full range. You've got to go and find the really small labels to get that nowadays. Back in the 80s, they used to do it right, didn't they? And
there is a final irony that you can listen to sort of any old dross by Stock Aitken and Waterman, and it's often there is more dynamic range than there is on supposedly sort of quite audiophile stuff in 2015. Yes.
So come on, give us your highlights of what people should be digging out in terms of original 80s recordings to hear things at the very best.
Right. Well, there's a couple of options. I mean, this is a bit of a cliche, but it does still stand. Paul Simon's Graceland is still just. It's I really like it as an album. It is an audiophile cliche, but it is beautifully recorded. It's a joy to listen to, and there have been remasters and all the rest of it. But actually, if you can find an original CD, ironically, it's the first CD my dad ever bought. So we have got the original CD is still just a really wonderful demonstration of what CD can actually do. Then, in terms of just one of the best recorded albums, full stop, Colour of Spring by Talk Talk. It's bloody marvellous. It really, really is awesome. Doesn't matter. You can go for the vinyl, which was mastered in Germany and is just stunning. The CD is equally excellent. Equally, if you've got Tidal, that's a perfectly good. That's the remastered version, but it's still awesome. And then bit of an odd one, but it's a fabulous album. Is Bronski Beat's Age of Consent, a seminal gay protest album. Funny story. My dad, who is not particularly clued up on matters of gay protest, wandered into the then R Price at the end of Waterloo Station in the 80s, wearing full military uniform, and picked up a copy of The Age of Consent by Bronski Beat to buy, featuring, as it does, a big pink triangle on the front and the words "The Age of Consent." Just wandered up to buy it, and shocked you. He goes, "Oh, you're really brave." And I goes, "Well, no, not really. It's just a uniform." No idea at all of any of the sort of subtext of it, but subtext or not, it's a fantastic album. And again, just if you I mean, there's the sort of classic single off it, Small Town Boy. If you just objectively sit back and listen to how quietly it starts and just how much level builds over the course of the song, and then just try and find a modern recording that does anything like that, you'll be struggling, in all honesty. And that was a chart pop release, and it's still beautifully done.
Yeah, one of my favourites. I keep going back to it because it's just brilliantly recorded. Controversial figure later in life, but at the time, I mean, it was probably the biggest album. I think it was the biggest album of the 80s, and that's Thriller, Michael Jackson. It's
biggest
just
album of all time, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's still strongest selling of all time, I believe.
Yeah, and it just sounds brilliant, really, really good. I was listening to Tidal a couple of weeks ago now through the Genelex, and you listen to stuff that's recorded now, and then you go back to that stuff, and it's just the way it's put together, the way it's mixed, the full dynamic range. It's such a good sounding album.
It's true. That said, controversial here. My favourite Michael Jackson album is Off the Wall. I think just the sheer joy of it, you can't beat.
Yeah, that's a really good album.
Definitely. And then for
really
full 80s joy,
yeah,
it's not Thriller. It's got to be Bad. Come on. It's not quite. I agree with you. It lacks some of the presentational.
No, I mean, there's only a couple of tracks really on Bad that I like. Whereas I could sit and listen to Thriller straight through. And Off the Wall, like you said, excellent.
Off the Wall's just magnificent.
Yeah,
it is the best Michael Jackson album by country mile.
Okay, so you're only allowed to pick one to wrap up on this point because we've got some hardware to go back and talk about. So what would it be if you're going to recommend one 80s album that's really well recorded and
Colour of Spring by Talk Talk. That's the one. It's not just for the 80s, just full stop. It's an amazing album done by people who obviously cared on an obsessive level about how it sounds. It is perfect.
Okay, so going back to one of the ideas of Back to the Future 2, and that was simultaneously watching TV channels, having hundreds of channels. And we've got to remember, back then, Back to the Future 2, was that 87, 88?
89.
It was 89, was it? Oh, yeah, they did the two back-to-back, didn't they? Yeah. So it was 89. So you're still looking at 4 channels in the UK, and Sky was just about launching or had just launched at the end of the 80s, early 90s. So you didn't have that great a choice even with the satellite channels. I think it only came to about 20 extra channels back then. I mean, now you're looking at Freeview 166 alone on Freeview.
166 services, I think.
Services,
total.
is it?
Yeah,
right.
that includes radio and Red Button and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and then you've got Sky, which is I haven't had Sky for a while, Ed, but I'd imagine it's still 200 odd channels.
Oh, and the rest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So before we go to Steve, who's been to visit one of these new broadcasters, in terms of your viewing habits and in terms of the channels that you have to hand, guys, Mark, your viewing, do you tend to stream and watch catch up, or do you still watch TV channels? And if you do, which is it the same ones over and over again?
Yeah, I own. If it was just channels 1 to 4, I'd still be all right, and provided I could watch some live sport, which I can. So that kind of covers me. And then I've got Netflix, Amazon, Now TV. I've started that again, or rather, my daughter did inadvertently. I don't. I actually only need channels 1 to 4. In fact, I don't really need ITV.
Yeah,
I could get rid of that.
Yeah,
I mean,
but you'd have missed Downton Abbey. Did anyone see Downton Abbey last night?
Downton Abbey?
No, I don't watch
Downton Abbey. Well, as I say, normally Downton Abbey is entirely missable. But last night they clearly had been channeling John Hurt's immortal scene in Alien. And I don't want to say any more than that. It'll be on the ITV catch-up. I just skip through most of it. It's about 40-odd minutes in.
Okay, I'm intrigued. I will go and have a look. I used to be really big when it came to viewing. I used to have Sky. I used to have a full package on Sky. Paid a fortune for it. Had BT Sport as well. And, up until about 18 months ago, I looked at how much I was actually paying and how much I was actually watching. I junked it all in, and like you, Mark, I've got Now TV, subscribed to Netflix, subscribed to Amazon, and that does me.
There's only so much you can watch in a day, isn't there?
Yeah, and you got Freeview. The only thing I'm missing at the minute, which I'm going to have to buy at some point, is a PVR just to record stuff. Because stuff like Match of the Day and so on, I'd rather time shift that and watch it when I want to watch it, because it doesn't turn up on iPlayer till the middle of the week. Yeah. But that seems to be the only thing that I'm missing, and it seems to be that most of the good stuff that's on Sky, you can get that with the entertainment package on Now TV. And I'm thinking like Game of Thrones, if you're a Game of Thrones,
which is just started again.
Walking Dead, you can get that Now TV as well. You don't need the Sky package to do that, So definitely changing. So Steve, you went and visited BT Sport. They had an open house because they are the first to run an Ultra HD service. But there's a lot of caveats around this Ultra HD service, because none of the team here could review the box because none of us have got big enough pipes.
Yeah, you need Mark does have a big enough connection, but why was the reason you couldn't do it, Mark?
I haven't got a BT line.
Yeah, that was a fairly obvious reason.
I'm on Virgin Fibre, so I've not got a BT.
Yeah, but yes, apart from Mark, none of us even get close to the kind of bandwidth you need for this service. But, I mean, full credit to BT, for actually launching the first Ultra HD TV live broadcasts in the world. I think that's a big plus for them. You could say they're well ahead of the game in terms of the competition right now. And when you look at what they're doing behind the scenes here, obviously you think, okay, they put a lot of money into buying the rights of things like the Champions League, and the obvious reason for doing that is to push not just their Ultra HD service, but obviously their full BT Sports service, to get more people to take BT as a service provider, and it's a way of driving their business. Fair enough. But they are dead serious about being a broadcaster. It's not just that they bought the rights to it. They are a broadcaster in every sense of the word. And the facility that they've built in the old broadcast centre that was built for the Olympics, in the Olympic Park, is state of the art, and it's huge. The main studio, and the way they've done it is really good, because they've got the main studio, which is the size of like an aircraft hangar, and then there's also 2 other studios within that studio, so you can actually see when they're filming stuff. You can see things going on in the background. It's like a bit of theatre. So they've got 3 studios in total, one of which is enormous. They've got obviously they're feeding this out to all over Europe, so they've got all these control rooms, all this facility. It is quite remarkable what they've built, and in fact they were also quite proud to say they've managed to build what is state of the art, but on a relatively tight budget. They haven't just thrown an infinite amount of money at it. They've done it on a tight budget. They said it was a lot less than the BBC spent to build their new studios up in Scotland.
I think it would have been cheaper to build a new studio on the moon than what the BBC ended up spending. To be fair, it's a fairly low bar if you're going to come in under the BBC. Although that said, I am glad that they are taking being a broadcaster seriously, because it's sure as hell not very good at telecoms.
I've got BT and I'm fine with it. Thank you very much.
They were useless. I kicked them well into touch.
Nah, no, it's fine. Anyway, so they're obviously, they're serious about being a broadcaster. They built a really great facility to deliver their live sports broadcasts. I mean, obviously at the moment it's very much dominated by live sports. They also make some programs associated with sports, like the Claire Balding show is actually made by BT Sport, and then they basically have sold a cut down half-hour versions of the BBC, which they broadcast on BBC Two. So there's a lot of work in conjunction with other broadcasters, BBC, Channel 4, people like that they're working with, which is good to see. They obviously they didn't want to say anything about their future plans, but you could see them moving into other areas of broadcasting in the future. There's no reason why they shouldn't. I think they've got some deal going on with AMC as well, so that would be the first step, I believe. But not only is it that they're serious about being a broadcaster, but it's the level of technology they're trying to deliver into the home. If you watch their coverage of a Champions League night when there's how many 8 or 10 games going on simultaneously, you can watch them all, and you can get live updates as you're watching one game of what's happening on another game, and then just flick back and see that goal or whatever, free kick, or whatever it was happens in that other game, then go back to your game. It was staggering, the level of technology available.
Yeah, now hang on a second. I know this is impressive, and I have experienced the BT one, and it's extremely good. I feel compelled to actually point out that I can't remember which French broadcaster it is, but they had this up and running with the French First Division, Premier League, whatever you want to call it, at least 15 years ago, and I think earlier than that. They just introduced a 10-second lag. They used to broadcast half to 3/4 of the games live, and it would be goal flash X versus Y. And because of the time lag, you could then flick over to the channel in question and watch it happen ostensibly live. It was really, that was pretty groundbreaking for the time they were doing it. I'm assuming what BT's done is not
infinitely more sophisticated than that.
But nonetheless, it's not a new concept. It's been around for quite a long time.
I'm not a massive football fan, and that night we were watching Man U versus Wolfsburg in Ultra HD 4K. I tell you one thing, you get used to watching things in 4K really quickly. When we flipped over to one of the full HD channels, it looked rubbish in comparison. But they we really got into the whole night of it, not just that one game, but all the games going on and all the goals and all the penalties and free kicks and excitement that was happening. And they had another program being broadcast simultaneously, which is basically a bunch of guys, including Howard Webb, the referee, in a room talking about what's happening on all the games, and and obviously giving their opinions on free kicks or penalties, and Howard Webb would say, well, that was a penalty, that wasn't a penalty. So it was like Saturday Football, the one the BBC do, but with pictures rather than just audio. It was very impressive. I mean, you can see that they really. I mean, what amazed me was how serious they are about this. I just kind of assumed, they bought the rights to get people to buy their service. But yes, that's true. But they're very, very serious about delivering a full package service in terms of live sport, and certainly the technology that they're employing is cutting edge.
Steve,
and obviously the most. Sorry, go on, Mark.
Yeah, just a question. With the new cameras, is it allowing them to open up a wider field of view on 1080p?
Yeah, that's what
it is, because I noticed it on Saturday. That's much wider than it was used to be.
What they're doing, the way they're broadcasting 4K is obviously they've only got a finite number of cameras, but they haven't. But they've also got the world's first. They've got. But one of the big problems they had was developing an outside broadcast truck that could deliver 4K, and they've been testing it for 2 years. It's taken them a long time to get to this point. But what they're doing with 4K broadcasts is they're actually using 2 cameras, so you're getting like over half the pitch in each shot. So it's like being at the game.
It's really impressive.
It's really good because what you're seeing is what all the other players are doing. You're not just because often, obviously, on normal broadcast, they'll kind of zoom in on 1 or 2 players, and you'll get like that bit of action, but you don't get the whole picture of what's happening on the rest of the pitch. With this, it's like being at a live match where you can see what everyone else is doing around them. When someone makes a pass, you go, "Oh, that guy's over there." I think that's a much better way of watching football. Actually, really works for me. So I think that's perhaps an aspect of 4K people haven't thought of before, but it makes maybe initially it's partly down to a limited number of cameras, but I think because of the higher resolution and the fact you can do that, it makes it a more enjoyable experience watching football because it feels more like you actually had a game.
Definitely. definitely. It was really appreciable. It made more of a difference to me than the actual resolution bump.
Yeah.
The actual seeing more of the game, being more like being in the stand.
They were using flat screen TVs. They actually were Samsungs, but they were JU7500s, is it? 700, the flat versions. And I said, any reason why they're flat and not curved? Because what, football's got, football fields are flat, aren't they? So that was their view on it. They weren't too keen on curved tellies, and they also were not very keen on 3D. But I have to agree with it too. I think 3D broadcasting of sport was a bit of a disaster because they kept having a habit of putting cameras down by the side of the pitch, and you've got no idea what was going on. No, it's I mean, obviously it's still early days, and that's a fact. And
it's really restrictive at the minute as well, because we've already mentioned the pipes and how much data you need to get, and they're delivering it via the internet as well. It's not.
Well, they seem to feel that's the only way it's going to get delivered. That they didn't seem to think that we're going to see much out of Sky anytime soon.
Yeah, of course they're going to say that, Steve.
But we'll see. I mean, Sky have been suspiciously quiet of late, don't you think?
I mean, of course.
I think ultimately, if you Sky's sort of modus operandi will be to come in with more than just sport.
Yes.
That is, I think, key to their. I mean, let's face it. At the moment, it's the breadth of content across the platform that gives them an edge. So you'll probably find that they'll be looking to work up a 4K movie channel at the very least, and you'll find that I would have assumed that at least some of the stuff they're producing, their native stuff themselves, they must be, if they've got any eye on the future, be shooting some of that in 4K as well.
But you see, I think the big problem here is I don't think broadcast is the future of 4K delivery at all. I don't see it happening. And I've read a few interviews recently with people from the BBC who are involved with these things and from other broadcasters, and there's no interest there from the broadcast side in delivering 4K.
Well, no, hang on a second. If we clarify that, the BBC is saying they aren't because the nasty government's taken all their money away, so they're having a sulk. So they're not.
How would they deliver it over broadcast? I don't think you. Can.
I don't think that is it. To be honest, that's a sort of secondary thing. They're just at the moment they're posturing and saying they aren't doing anything because they don't have the money to do it.
But it wasn't just the BBC though, Ed. You're talking about a lot of European broadcasters, and it's something that Steve mentioned as well when you talked to the BDA and they were talking about talking to broadcasters and stuff. There was very little interest from European broadcasters as well.
No, there isn't. That's true. I mean, there's very little interest. There's very little consensus. And talking to BT, they seem to think that it was going to be a lot harder to deliver any kind of broadcast 4K than people perhaps initially thought. And you're right, they actually said the future is internet delivery, no question about that. That's definitely the only way it's going to be viable. And that makes sense. The interesting thing will be, you've mentioned it, Phil, but is finding content. I mean, obviously, if you're broadcasting live sport or something like that with a 4K camera, fine. But when you consider that still most films are finished at 2K and not 4K, there's only a limited amount. Like you're saying, Mark, they have to start making their own call. I think it was Ed who said it, make their content as Netflix have been doing of late, and Amazon. You have to make the content, finish it in 4K, and to create your own 4K content because
it's a lot easier though for them to go back and do that than it is to set up a broadcasting system and broadcast it over there and all the rest of it. So delivering content in terms of films and so on, it's far easier for them to go back and rescan or redo it in 4K. Than it is for broadcast to work. I mean, you're not going to get sitcoms and all the rest of it unless it's made by Amazon or Netflix. That's where the future is for 4K. It's services like Amazon and Netflix, and it's up to the broadcasters to get into that sphere and work in that sphere. Otherwise, your highest resolution on TV broadcast is going to be HD. You're not going to get 4K.
Yeah. So in answer to your original question, Phil, yes, I was very impressed by BT Sports facilities, and I'd say they were gunning for Sky at the moment.
Right, so the last thing, we talked about pull-down screens, and the forums lit up last week because we had our review of the CX952 OLED TV, or the 950 as it's called everywhere else, from Panasonic. It's the big thing. It was the big thing that we haven't been able to talk about for months on the podcast because of NDAs and all the rest of it. It's a screen that we saw back in the end of June. It was announced at IFA in September, and Steve had the privilege, because I was away on holiday, to review the TV. And the LG is turning up this week. Is it there, Steve? It's arrived, is it? So you've got the flat LG as well. So you've had a look at the 952. Is it the future?
Is OLED the future?
Is OLED the future? Because at $8,000, it's a hell of a lot of money for the Panasonic.
Well, I think in general, yes. I still personally believe that OLED is the future. And briefly going back to the whole Back to the Future thing, I can definitely see a future where you can have pull down OLED screens. I mean, that's something it has been demonstrated in the past. I think.
Well, it's the reason why we have curved screens, because you could do that with OLED.
So I think absolutely that's definitely going to be the future. Obviously, there's still issues in terms of quality, production yields, etc. But no question, I think it's the future. And obviously, LG believe that because they've invested an awful lot of money in this, and have positioned themselves effectively as the monopolistic supplier of these panels at the moment. Now, moving on to the Panasonic. I mean, clearly this is a statement television on their part. I mean, they were top dog for a couple of years after Pioneer were pulled out of the market. They had their plasma TVs, and they were the picture quality top dogs for about 3-4 years, weren't they, Phil? And every year it was a big deal, the new Panasonic plasma. And when they pulled out of the plasma market, all they were left with was LCD. You know, there were other companies, people like Samsung or Sony, who'd spent years investing in LCD and had really pushed that technology as far as they could, and they were vastly superior to Panasonic, who were in a position of not making them themselves but shipping them in from somebody else and kind of playing catch up, and they'd lost a bit of their luster, a bit of their glory, and I think it stung them a bit. And this TV, I believe, is an attempt to recapture some of that glory by developing a no compromises, no holds barred, top picture quality television. First of all, they don't make OLED panels, so they have to buy it from LG. So it's a 65-inch curved OLED TV. So they're using a 65-inch curved OLED panel from LG Display. As we know from the past, Mark, that TV's had a few issues. Yep. Specifically, I use the term vignetting. I think you've used that, Phil, haven't you? But basically dark bits at the edges of the screen, which presumably are caused by how the panel's being driven, and also a bit of banding in just above black, like 5% or 5 IRE or 10 IRE, around about that part. You can get banding only on certain scenes, and I noticed I only actually managed to find it if I actually put a specific scene on that everyone had been talking about, rather than actually noticing normal content. But it is definitely there. If you put up a 5 IRE screen, you can see it. So those are obviously inherent limitations in the panel itself. And clearly, Panasonic have done everything they can to minimize this, and they certainly have handled the problem of vignetting well. That was not obvious. That was not apparent at all. So I think they limit that issue through however they're driving the panel. The slight banding just above black was still there, although, as I said, you didn't really see it unless you were using some very specific test material or very specific scenes. Specifically, I think you did this too, Mark, is the scene where Matthew McConaughey is getting out of bed first thing at the beginning of Interstellar. Yeah. But I mean, I can't say I saw anything else, including the Jaws campfire scene that also gets mentioned. That's the limitation of the panel, perhaps. But I think I think Panasonic have done everything they can to deliver as best a TV as you can make right now. And so what they've done is they've taken the panel itself, but they've created an attractive chassis with this Alcantara back, which, by the way, if you've got a cat, don't let anyone near it, because I'll use it as a scratching pad. They've got, the inputs are upward, downward facing inputs, so you can run the cables through cable ties and clips to make it all nice and tidy, then put the back panel on if you want to. You've got access to side inputs for certain things you may want to plug in and out, like USB. You've got a gorgeous stand, lovely build quality, the usual 2 remote controls. It has a stripped down smart platform, apparently because Panasonic are using all the processing power pretty much for the image quality. Although I don't see why they couldn't just put a better processor in, considering you're spending $8,000 on the thing. But that was their argument. So you don't get the full My Home screen or Firefox OS. You just get a very basic platform. But let's be honest, what do you use it mostly for? Netflix, BBC iPlayer, Amazon Instant. Well, they're there, and you can do 4K. And YouTube. So really, everything you're probably going to use is there without all the flashy bells and whistles. So is that a big loss? I don't know. I don't think it was a big loss personally. Sound quality was okay, could have been better, but I think if you're spending $8,000 on a TV, you're going to use some sort of outboard solution, or at least I recommend you do. Obviously, where Panasonic really think they've got the edges in terms of processing and image accuracy and calibration controls, and no question, out of the box, incredibly accurate picture in the THX cinema mode.
So if it was $8,000 of your own money?
No. If you ask me, would I spend £8,000 on it? No, and the reason, well, aside from the fact I haven't got £8,000 to spend on a telly, and that is a lot of money for a television. There's no question about this. This, like I said at the beginning, this is a statement product. I don't think they're expecting to sell very many of them. They probably don't have very many of them to sell, actually, because I think they were very picky on panels that they use and that sort of stuff. So, there's lots of reasons why it's expensive. They don't expect to sell very many. They just want to be able to get themselves back in the top tier again and say, look, we can make decent TVs. There you go. Hopefully, we'll see this trickle down to much cheaper Panasonic OLEDs, different screen sizes, and hopefully some flat ones as well, because obviously this one is curved, and not everyone likes a curve. But if it was my money right now, I mean, there's two ways of looking at this. One is, if you don't have to buy, I think we've had this conversation before, but you don't have to buy a TV right now. I would suggest don't buy a TV right now, because there's a lot of changes going on at the moment in terms of obviously OLED development, but also in terms of standards. So, it would probably pay to wait to see what comes out at CES in January and in March and April of next year. That would be my personal opinion. But if you were going to buy a TV right now, I would struggle to justify spending that much money on a television set. You can pick up the LG OLEDs for pretty much half that cost. And are they? Is the Panasonic $4,000 better? No.
Well, you're the only one that can answer that, because you've got the LG in there. So that's got to have to be one of the questions that you're going to have to answer.
Yeah. No, I mean, I would certainly struggle. Yeah, I don't think it'd be easy to justify that kind of expenditure on television. I don't think you're going to get. I mean, it's been interesting to see with the 950 that's just arrived, whether that image is vastly different from the one that was on the on their curved OLEDs, and whether they've perhaps had some feedback from Panasonic and have incorporated that into their patterns and how they drive them. Who knows?
The main questions are going to be: is it similar to Panasonic? Have they solved the vignette?
If the vignetting's gone, then that's a big step forward, isn't it?
Yeah. And then you've got to say, well, what advantage has the Panasonic then got over and above that? And you could say that we're going to have to wait, aren't we? Because otherwise I'm just speculating. But, is there this $4,000 difference? Well, and then are you prepared to pay it?
Yeah, when you consider you could buy two LGs for the same cost, have one in two different rooms. I mean,
it's best viewed as a technology demonstrator, which they're trying to recoup some costs on. Let's hope that it leads to some more accessible and more practical opportunities going forward.
If LG Display are prepared to sell their panel technology to third parties in return for some feedback on that, which seems to be the deal that they have with Panasonic, you could see the other Japanese manufacturer that's still making TVs get involved.
Yeah.
I mean, if we see others getting involved, I mean, the only one you're not going to see is Samsung getting involved, because there's no way they're going to get into bed with the biggest rival. But if you see others, and then there's also the Chinese manufacturers, and they're making quite a bit of noise about making their own stuff as well. So, be interesting. I mean, CES is going to be, I think, one of the big, and I'm not going to build it up because we've built it up before and it's been a disappointment, but it seems to be we're on the cusp of that wave about to break. Really, I think that's where we are in terms of technology. The wave's just about to break, and then we could see this technology then coming down into more acceptable price range. Price ranges that people can start to afford. It's certainly an enthusiast market. We have gone well over time, which is quite ironic when we're based on a time travel film.
We go back in time to the beginning and start again.
Yeah, we'll go back and start again. But before we do, the only real thing to say is that if you're listening to this on Wednesday, when the podcast goes out, then you can go to the cinema tonight in selected cinemas and watch Back to the Future Part 2.
It's on ITV too as well.
Is it? Oh, well, there you go. You don't have to
stay in and have a drink as well.
You can stay in and have a drink and not have to socialise, Ed?
Well, yeah, that's always an advantage.
The only other thing we need to mention is that next week the big film is, Steve?
SPECTRE opens on Monday. I know it sounds strange, but it opens on Monday the 26th of October. And I'm assuming everyone will be going to see it.
Actually, do you know what? I've been invited along to a showing.
So have I.
The day after.
The day after.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I'm contemplating it. It depends if I can get childcare.
Ed, going to the cinema, Christ, the earth would stop spinning.
Well, as I say, I'm going on. After all the things I said, I wasn't going anywhere near Star Wars at the opening sort of times. I'm going at the opening. So,
well, you actually go the day before.
It's all a bit radical.
So basically, we could be in a situation next week where I'm talking about SPECTRE and you've all seen it. Well, maybe not you, Mark, but the other two.
Bogged off.
It depends when. Well, we record on a Monday, so we're not going to see it on the Monday. So next podcast,
No, we won't have seen it. No, actually, that's a bit annoying.
So there you go. We won't be able to talk about it next week, folks. Rounding up the Blu-rays, again, it's Back to the Future 30th anniversary box set. If you're going to buy it, get the US version, because the US version has the complete animated series, whereas the UK version only has 2 episodes from the animated series. So if you want the full package, the US version is also region free.
I mean, I don't. Did you ever watch the animated series?
No.
I mean,
I didn't even know there was one.
No.
And on that bombshell, that really is it for the AVForums podcast this week. It's been feature packed. I hope you enjoyed it. Please remember to leave your 5 stars feedback, and we'll read your name out if you do. We'll do that next week. We'll catch up on who's left us some feedback and read some of them out. And all I need to do now is thank Steve Withers.
No, it can't be. I've just sent you Back to the Future.
Mark Hodgkinson.
Since when did you become the physical type?
And Ed Selly.
I mean, it's like I was just here yesterday.
I'm Phil Hinton. Thanks very much for listening, and we'll see you again next week.